you create a stress on the body. Maybe a little bit of damage, right? The body heals the damage, and then what it does is it tries to adapt so that the same insult no longer creates damage. So this is how you get stronger incrementally over time. This is why you can work out harder over time, because your body slowly adapts.
Yes.
So the question is, what does it take to get my body to adapt? A little more than you're doing now.
How do we build like this, I don't know, furnace burning machine inside of us? Is that a consistent weight training and nutrition practice?
Yeah.
Is it weight training 5 days a week?
No.
Is it, it's not doing to fatigue or failure, it's more like 70% weight training? What does that machine look like?
So the muscle building process is an adaptation process. So to use another example, it would be like, okay, so like going out in the sun and then your skin darkening to adapt to the UV rays. So it's very similar to what's happening when your body builds muscle. You go to the gym, you create a stress on the body, maybe a little bit of damage, right? The body heals the damage, and then what it does is it tries to adapt so that the same insult no longer creates damage. So this is how you get stronger incrementally over time. This is why you can work out harder over time, because your body slowly adapts.
Yes.
So the question is, what does it take to get my body to adapt? A little more than you're doing now. That's it. So if you're doing nothing right now, literally 10 body weight squats, 5 push-ups, and maybe a couple band rows is enough to get the body to start the adaptation process. And again, you want to do the right dose, meaning doing more than is appropriate will only get your body to prioritize healing over to adaptation. Your body can't adapt because it's only trying to heal this damage that you cause. So the appropriate amount is literally a little more than you're doing now. So for the average person watching this with strength training, if they did 30 minutes of strength training once a week, they would get strength gains. And then when that felt easy, they could do an hour of strength training once a week. And then when that got easy, they could do it a little harder.
Right.
They could add a little more load. And then eventually they could add an extra day. And there's a lot you could do with 2 days a week with strength training. There's a lot of room to go when it comes to load, exercises, intensity. There's so much room to go with 2 days a week that the average person, I can get them to what they want realistically, which is 2 days a week. Now, more than that, then we're talking about, well, I want my biceps to bulge, or I want, my glutes to sit real high, or I want more definition in my delts to really pop out. Or now we're looking at more days a week. But 2 to 3 days a week, you can get really, really far. The old time strength athletes, in the 1930s and 40s, they worked out full body 3 days a week. And those guys, people like Steve Reeves, they had phenomenal physiques, just working out 3 days. So you can go real far, and you don't want to look at the extreme fitness fanatics as, well, that's what I need to do. That's not what you need to do.
Right.
That's not what you need to do.
Strength training is the core, is the key, is what it sounds like.
It is.
And that'll burn body fat if you're doing strength training of legs and chest. You don't have to do abs all day long.
No, that's a good question, right? You're kind of alluding to maybe spot reduction, right? So I want to burn body fat from an area, so I'll train that area. It doesn't work that way, but what you do is you develop and sculpt and strengthen the muscles underneath. It's important to train the whole body. The best exercises to choose, first off, you want to choose the ones with most bang for your buck, right? So if I'm only going to spend 45 minutes exercising, I want to do the exercises that have the most carryover and have the biggest impact. Essentially, you want to do compound lifts or big gross motor movements. So rather than doing like a curl, which is a very simple, single joint exercise, I would do a row, which also involves the biceps, but now I'm working the back and the whole upper body.
Or a pull-up, right? Like
That's a great one. Dips and squats and deadlifts. Those exercises do the work of like 5 exercises combined. So you want to do those big gross motor movements because they give you the most bang for your buck. And for the average person, and I talk about this in my book, go to the gym and pick, 3 or 4 gross motor movements and just practice them. So today I'm going to go squat, press, and row. I'll do 3 sets of each. I'll rest for a minute and a half in between, and then I'll leave.
That's it. 3 sets of each, 80%?
Yeah, you want to train, again, more than you're used to, not beyond that. You want to feel good at the end of your workout. It's okay to feel a little sore the day after, but if you're sore to the touch or you're sore for 2 days, you went too hard.
Really? So you shouldn't feel too sore?
No, soreness is a terrible indicator of...
You push too hard.
It's actually a good indicator that you did too much. It's not an indicator of, wow, I had a great workout.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, high level, strength athletes, they rarely get sore. They'll get sore, maybe if they change something up, but they really get sore. You want a little bit of soreness is okay. So, when I first became a trainer, I would ask my clients, how'd you feel, after your workout? Oh, I was so sore, and I'd be so proud. Yeah, I got a real sore. Later, when I really figured this out, I'd say, how did you feel after your workout? Oh, I got so sore. And I'd say, okay, we went too hard. Let's scale it back.
Really?
Yeah. And what you'll get through, and trust me, try this out. When you approach it this way, you're going to see more consistent results. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you end up getting stuck on this hamster wheel of breakdown and recovery. So I hammer my body, break it down, my body heals. Oh, I'm back to my workout, break it down, my body heal, and you just end up in the same place all the time. Breakdown, recovery, breakdown, recovery. What you want is a little breakdown, recovery, adaptation. Breakdown, a little bit of recovery, adaptation. So you want to end up better than you were before. And you will see consistent strength gains and consistent progress, especially within the first year or two of exercise, if you approach it this way. After a couple of years of exercise, it gets a little more challenging. But those first couple of years, you should see some pretty consistent gains.
Has anything evolved or changed for you in the last 4 years? As you continue to get older, you have kids, you have a family, and all these different things. You're running a business, all this stuff. Or do you keep the lifestyle, the diet, or the nutrition and the training pretty much the same from 4 years ago?
No, it has to change. It has to. The key with exercise and nutrition is understanding that it's this very powerful, valuable tool. It's multifaceted that can improve the quality of your life regardless of the context of your life in that moment. So my workouts and my nutrition look different when I'm not getting good sleep because I have an infant at home, or when something stressful is happening in my business, or I have lots of energy and I feel great and I'm getting good sleep. Now it changes. Or, hey, I'm going to come be on Lewis Howes' show. I want my mental acuity to be really good. I'm going to be sharp. My diet will change and my workouts will change around that as well. Or I'm going on vacation. So I mold it and change it all the time. And really the idea is, can I improve the quality of my life right now? And so that's what I ask myself when I go work out. How do I feel right now? What's going to make me feel better? What's going on in my life? What's going to improve that? I can't. If I apply the same intensity, same training all the time as my life changes, that means I'm either going to underdo it or overdo it, hurt myself, or not get anything out of my workouts. It's like I'm never. It's going to be very hard to do the right amount. So you have to change it and mold it as things change in your life. So sometimes that means you're going after it and you're having these great intense workouts and you're seeing these new gains in strength or whatever. And sometimes that means I'm going to just relieve some stress right now.
Sure.
And I'm going to feel better.
Yeah. I think it was about 10 years ago when I remember hearing the stat that a third of Americans were obese.
Yeah.
I think it was 10 years ago. And now I just heard recently, I think it's either 40% or 50%. In that range of Americans are obese. I'm not sure if that's what you've heard or...
We're almost there. We're almost half.
Almost at 50%, right? Mm-hmm. What do you see happening over the next 5 to 10 years in kind of our society, in our world, to look out for in terms of the health, nutrition, and fitness space? And how can we start shifting the obesity, epidemic?
We need to change the conversation. This has been my motivation since starting my podcast and my channel. The motivation has been to shift the direction, the conversation in the fitness space so that it becomes truly effective. We need to move from the mechanistic aspects of diet and exercise. Now, those are important to understand, so I want to be clear. It's good to know proteins, fats, and carbs. It's good to know calories. It's good to know workouts and how they affect my body and what works for me. But that's not the main conversation. The main conversation is, how can I develop a relationship with exercise and nutrition that lasts forever? What are the behaviors that lead to success within that? How can I move through the 4 stages of learning so I can make this an unconscious action to where it becomes like breathing, which it can be. I know people sometimes balk at that and think, oh, that's not possible. Yes, it is. It's totally possible. You just have to move from where a lot of people are right now, which is unconscious incompetence, to becoming consciously incompetent, to becoming consciously competent, which is, okay, I got to pay attention to eventually becoming unconsciously competent, where now this is kind of what I do. And it's a process. And the health and fitness space is doing the world a disservice if it doesn't communicate to people in this way. If we keep staying on this whole, it's carbs, it's fats, it's sugars, it's this diet food, it's this superfood, this is the new workout, this is the new fad. If we keep doing that, we're going to end up worse and worse and worse. We're not going to solve anything. If we talk to people and say, hey, here's the deal. Let's understand the true value of food so that we can start to develop a relationship with food where you enjoy eating in a way where you're taking care of yourself. All right, what does that look like? Well, most people understand food value from a very narrow perspective. What is going to give me the most hedonistic value? What tastes the best? You go out to eat, lunch with your friends. Hey, what do you guys want to have for lunch? Oh, Chinese or Mexican, or let's get Italian or whatever. The value that we've placed on food is around that. We don't understand all the other values. So you got to let's start to pay attention to all the values of food. How does this food affect me emotionally? How does it affect my digestion, my skin? How does this affect my hair?
Yeah.
When do I crave certain foods? Is it when I'm stressed? Is it when I'm anxious? Do I eat differently when I'm in a restaurant versus when I'm with friends versus when I'm on my own? You have to kind of bring awareness first. Then start to point out the positives and the negatives. Hey, that thing that I like eating so much because it tastes so good, that's the thing that keeps giving me heartburn. Pay attention to that. Or, that one dish that I don't like the taste so much, my God, when I eat that though, I feel so good. My digestion is really good. Pay attention to that. And here's what happens. Over time, you start to develop a relationship with food where the value of food now is much more complete. Then what happens is you actually start to crave or want foods that actually benefit you in the truest sense. You start to develop balance, right? So, hey, my digestion's off. I know, you know what? I want these particular foods because they make me feel really good. Or my energy's low. I know these foods are going to make me feel real good. Or, hey, I'm going out with my friends. We're going to have a good time and drink some beers. Let me get that food that has that hedonistic value so we can all connect, have some fun, and have some laughs. Because that's a value too, right?
Yes.
But you have to have this. By the way, the food industry knows this. So this is not, I'm not like, discovering anything here. I'm just communicating what they've known for a long time. This is how they sell their products. They sell you food with excitement and, beer commercials, and they show you the girls and the beach and, eat this. Look, we crave popcorn when we go to the movies. They've already created that association. We probably already have foods that we have emotional connections to because of maybe something in childhood or because it reminds us of somebody that,
Right.
So you can do this with yourself. You just have to become aware around it. You also have to interrupt impulsive behaviors around food to bring that awareness. So a good example would be, like, for me, there's definitely certain foods that I can become very impulsive around. So like potato chips for me is the worst.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
That and pizza.
Oh, pizza's another one, right? So what I'll do is I won't have potato chips in my house.
Right.
But I don't say I can't have them. If I want them, I'll drive a mile to the grocery store and I'll get them.
Right. But it's more resistance to get there.
I have a barrier.
Yes.
The barrier is, getting my shoes on, getting in the car, driving to the grocery store. And usually I'm like, I don't really want it that much.
Right.
So you can do that with yourself and create those barriers and create that awareness, and then identify what is making me feel the way that I feel when I crave these particular foods. And this is, again, this is a bit of a process, but once you identify these types of things, you stop using food as a drug. And you start valuing food for its total values. Because when you talk to people, I love talking to people who've done this for decades, people in their 70s who really, they just live a good, healthy lifestyle. Ask them, do you enjoy eating healthy? Oh, I love it. Like, do you really love it, or do you just do it because you like the results? No, I enjoy eating healthy. What they've done is they've built that relation. So it's totally possible. You just have to.
Yeah.
And this is what the industry needs to start to communicate. We need to start to talk to people in this way versus the cut your carbs out, or only eat these foods, or eat this specific diet. This is going to solve it for you. Not going to work because you're not solving the root issue.
If someone is above 60 or 70 right now and they're listening to this and maybe they haven't been well with their diet or they're working out at all. They're just kind of like living and a little obese. And have some minor health challenges, what can they be doing right now if they're over 60 to try to live a better, healthier, longer life?
Well, let's pretend they're not over 60, but we'll go there. Let's pretend they're 35 or 40 and they're slightly or obese and have a couple number of health problems, and they're all in the, because we're all in this together. What are we going to tell this person? Here's what I'm going to tell them. I'm going to say, okay, the first thing that we need to focus on is metabolic correction. And we're going to do that by optimizing your protein. So you are what are they? They're probably not eating a ton, or maybe they're eating a lot of carbohydrates. I'm going to say, well, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to say we are going to ideally, and again, they might not do this, 1 gram per pound ideal body weight, which if this person is 150 pounds, it would be 150 grams of protein. That is high, right? That is on the higher end. So this guy might be like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to say, you know what? That's fine. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on metabolic correction. So I am going to start you at 3 meals a day. I don't care when your first meal is, but that first meal after you are coming out of a fast is the most important. And you are going to optimize that for dietary protein.
Interesting.
And the reason it's the most important is because they are catabolic, they are fasting. At that moment, if we get that threshold, that nutrition, that protein threshold right, you will stimulate their muscle.
So what should be eating the first meal a day?
So that could be, I would want them to hit 40 to 50 grams of protein.
Really?
And that could be a whey protein shake, which you could probably get a little bit less. It could be a beef patty. It could be
chicken and eggs.
It could be chicken and eggs. It could be whatever.
Okay, 40, 50 grams of protein your first meal.
Just get that right. Just if the listener would do that for me.
No matter how big
no
how much you weigh?
How big that's right.
40 to 50 grams. If you're 150 pounds or 250 pounds, just try to get in that range.
I mean, listen, could it be between 30 and 50? Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Between 30 and 50 would be great. If you are older, if you are that 60 plus, the muscle goes through a normal physiological change called anabolic resistance. You want to push their protein a little bit higher. If you are younger, like you could probably get away with 30 to 40 grams of protein.
Okay. Does it matter if you work out first in the morning or fast for 5 hours in the morning? Doesn't matter. Just your first meal when you eat, after you wake up.
Yeah.
Whether it's right away or 10 hours later.
Right. That first meal should be optimized for protein.
Okay.
And I would argue that if that meal is not around training, our target carbohydrate load, and if they're not training, would be 40 grams or less that first meal. So you keep the carbohydrates lower that first meal. The reason is it ends up being about a 1-to-1 ratio of, if
Carbs
they want
the same or less. Or you want less.
It would be less, right? Because anything really above the 50 grams of carbohydrates creates a more robust insulin response.
Spike, yeah.
And you don't want that for your first meal. You want that first meal to be very smooth and stable.
Okay.
And not only that, and Heather Leidy, who I had mentioned earlier, has done some very interesting fMRI research that, one of the things that protein does is it's very satiating. And I always tell patients not to worry about their strengths, but to plan for their weaknesses. And when you augment willpower by leveraging dietary protein, you plan for it. You're much less likely to overeat.
Right.
So you nail that 40 grams of protein first, maybe a little bit lower carbs and some fat. Then that next meal is maybe 4 or 5 hours later, right? So you stimulate muscle. You now have robustly stimulated muscle. That next meal will be another, again, depending on what you need, I like to target around 30 grams at a minimum.
Protein.
Yeah.
Okay.
The data, it's interesting. So a lot of the literature doesn't actually support much discussion on that lunch meal. It's really that first meal. And then, but again, if we're talking about maintaining healthy skeletal muscle, we're also talking about maintaining blood sugar, right? Compliance is really important. Protein, it's very hard to store protein as fat. There's a high thermic effect of food, meaning it takes more energy to utilize it. And part of the reason I believe is because it stimulates muscle. So it takes anywhere from 20% of the food that you eat, right, to actually, it takes 20% of that energy.
Right.
So if you're eating 100 calories of protein, there is some contribution to that.
Gotcha.
Then that last meal of the day, I would say I would make that more robust. Again, that 40 to 50 grams. And any listener could do this. The younger you are, you can, muscle is typically healthier. You can get away with a little bit less. The older you are, the more protein you need at once to overcome anabolic resistance. Skeletal muscle is fascinating, in case you were wondering what I really thought about it. It's actually a nutrient sensor.
Have you seen all the new stretch places opening up lately? Well, I get it, because new studies have pointed out that stretching is actually more effective than brisk walking. And I can list off all the benefits of stretching, but it would take up this entire episode. The biggest plus, though, is how it helps people with chronic pain issues that they never thought would go away, especially pain in the lower back or feet. In 2021, an inventor who was struggling with herniated discs named Dan Castle launched an easy-to-use device called the Castle Flex, and it healed him in less than a year. People are saying it's the most effective upper and lower body stretching device ever created. And not just anyone is saying it. Big names like Dr. Sadri of the Atlanta Braves, Martha Stewart, and Yankee superstar Harrison Bader are all posting about how it's helped them. It's a patented device that allows the user to hold an easy-to-grip, weighted, brushed aluminum bar. Your foot goes into a specially designed foot hammock that pulls your toes into complete dorsiflexion, allowing your entire leg to get stretched at the exact same time, instead of just your calf or just your hamstring. Every muscle in your leg is firing at the same time, from the plantar fascia all the way up to the glutes. So I tried it for the first time, and I have never felt a stretch like this before. It's incredible. It's the same price as 1 or 2 massages or chiro sessions, and it will be used daily for many years. So it has my vote. This device is like WD-40 for your achy bones and tight muscles. We already checked, and they are USA owned, vet owned, and shipped from Atlanta, Georgia, with a 2-week money-back guarantee. They have sold out 7 times since launching in 2021, and they don't do sales. But you're in luck, because we got a code for the greatness community. So take advantage and get yourself one by going to castleflex.com. That's Castle, like where a king lives, and Flex, but with 2 X's. Get 10% off by using code HOWS10. That's HOWES 10 at castleflex with 2 X's.com.
It senses our nutrients, and it senses leucine.
Senses
and that
what?
leucine, which is that
yes.
that amino acid. And that's really how we need to think about protein, is we really need to understand that protein requirement as we age is really about a meal threshold. 24-hour protein is very important. Secondarily, having protein in discrete meals is incredibly valuable. Because if you don't, you won't stimulate your tissue.
Sure.
And as you age, that tissue becomes more marbled with fat. It becomes more challenging. The other thing is resistance exercise is another way to stimulate tissue. And this is where you get with a great trainer. I know I typically recommend between 3 and 4 sessions of resistance exercise a week. But again, having someone evaluate you as it relates to training. And then another thing that's overlooked is mitochondria. And that's really the cardiovascular aspect. And the current recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity now. And I think again, we're very split. People are really into resistance training, or they're really into cardio. But when we think about longevity, we must address both.
Is cardio, when I think of cardio, I think more about people trying to lose weight.
Right, that's not a great strategy.
Is it helping you build muscle when you
Not
are just
really.
running and riding a bike?
I mean, not really. Muscle to grow requires metabolic
Resistance.
stress, requires
Heavier
mechanical
lifting.
tension, exactly. Metabolic stress, ribosomal biogenesis, protein and calories.
Then why do people focus so much on cardio? Is it for heart health? Is it for other
Yes,
benefits?
I believe that number one, it's very easy to do. You don't have to have advanced knowledge of training
Machines
protocol.
and equipment.
And that's hard. That's hard for people. There is that barrier to entry. Cardiovascular, a lot of the literature, a lot of the data has always been done on cardio. again, because it's easy. You first use rodent models, then you transition to humans. But cardiovascular activity is very valuable as it relates to mitochondrial function, as it relates to energy, and there's a natural decline as we age. Again, aging doesn't get easier,
Sure.
but being able to be strong and capable and optimizing for dietary protein will be the ultimate in longevity.
Yeah.
And there's so much confusion about the narrative that my fear is, when you address it in your later life, you're missing this huge opportunity midlife. Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, they don't develop later in life. They start in your 30s. When I was looking at that participant's brain, when I was looking, we'll just call her Sarah, when I was looking at Sarah's brain, it didn't start then. It started in her 30s.
From nutrition or
Yes.
from, wow.
From excess, from being overweight. Had she built muscle, it would have been a metabolic buffer.
Right.
When you look at diseases of aging, it's not the aging. These diseases like Alzheimer's, cardiovascular, these start in your 30s. Sarcopenia, which is the big one, where sarcopenia is loss of muscle mass and function, which is we see people get much smaller. That doesn't start then.
Right.
It starts much earlier. So if you eat the way that you did in your 20s, you have no chance of protecting your muscle. The changes will be subtle until one day they're not.
You just start shrinking and getting weaker. And
You have increase in adipose tissue. You now fall into the general category of one of the millions that are overweight, have high blood sugar, insulin resistance, you name it. And it's something that happens over time. And if we continue the conversation that is very distracted about, well, we'll take this and we'll take this and we'll do that, as opposed to do the foundational things that we have direct control over, which is train hard, optimize and prioritize for a protein forward plan. You do those fundamental things, everything else is gravy.
that's it. So if you focus on protein and you train consistently,
Yes.
you should be
Able to protect your muscle.
and it sounds like eliminate a lot of the health problems or risks that could come your way.
This is the ultimate in a muscle-centric approach.
What was the things that you saw when you went to these blue zones that they did that maybe you weren't even thinking they would do? Like, what were the surprising things they did? Or the unsurprising things they
Yeah, I mean, there was a few things I saw that were kind of striking to me that made sense. But one was that in Ikaria, which was one of the Greek blue zones, they eat so much wild food. So they had wild greens, summer greens, winter greens. They had wild mushrooms. They had wild sage tea. They had wild fish. They had so much wild food in their diet. And we know that wild foods are much more nutrient dense. Why? Because they're stressed. And stressed plants make more protective compounds. Those protective compounds are called phytochemicals. They give the color and the richness and the flavor. What people don't understand is the more flavorful a food is naturally, the more phytochemicals it has.
Interesting.
If you go to your garden at the end of August and pick a cherry tomato that's ripened in the hot sun that explodes in your mouth like the most incredible flavor. But if you go to a store-bought tomato and you cut it, it's like cardboard, tasteless. What's the difference? It's the phytochemicals. So flavor always follows the phytochemical richness of a food. So not the stuff you put on it or sauces or salt or fat or sugar to make it taste better, which food industry does, but just the natural flavor.
Interesting.
So the more flavorful a food is, the better it is. So wild. They eat a lot of wild food, and it's so flavorful. The other thing was interesting was that shepherds, had this culture of going and knowing exactly which plants to feed their animals at which time of year to graze them. So it would shepherd them. They'd eat all these wild plants, but they knew if this herb was coming in at this time of year, they'd go eat this herb. And if this plant was coming in this time of year, they'd go eat that thing. I'm like, why are you doing that? He says, we know, because the meat and the milk taste better when we, And so it kind of, they were not doing it because it was better for them or because it was for longevity or because...
Tastes better.
Right, the cheese, it tastes better. So it turns out that we know now that phytochemicals are not just in plants. And phyto means plant. Right? They're not just in plants, they're also in animals. So the work of Fred Provenza and Stephen Van Vliet from Duke have clearly shown that when animals are eating a wide array of wild plants or a wide array of, planted grasses and flowers and different things, they will seek out medicine in the food. So they will literally go and eat major, calorie crops, let's say, but then they'll go and sample from 100 different plants to get their medicines. And so these wild animals, these wild plants are being eaten, and the phytochemicals are accumulating in the meat and the milk of these animals. So studies have shown, for example, that you can have as high levels of the catechins in green tea in goat milk that's from goats eating certain wild plants. Yeah. So it's mind-blowing, and there may be ways that even these get transmuted. So eating regeneratively raised meat, I went to a restaurant here in LA last night called Matu, where they have regeneratively raised meat.
Was it amazing?
It was amazing. Now, it wasn't as fatty and kind of like marble, corn-fed meat, but it was delicious, and it was tasty and yummy and amazing.
What was this place called?
Matu, M-A-T-U.
I'll have to check it out.
Really good. It's in Beverly Hills. And you'd love it. It's so good. And you can eat that and know you're eating from an animal that's been well taken care of, that's living out in its natural habitat, that's regenerating the environment, that's restoring the ecosystems, increasing biodiversity, conserving water in the soils, that's reducing climate change, that's producing more nutrient-dense food that is rich in phytochemicals and good fats and more antioxidants and more minerals and just pretty much everything. So
that's incredible.
So that was a sort of I think a key to part of their longevity was they lived on this stuff. They basically were shepherds, and goats and sheep were their livelihood.
What was about their relationships?
Yeah.
How did that play in? Did they have certain types of relationships with family members? Did they have intimate relationships? Were they married for long periods of time? Did they have 10 wives? What was the whole?
I don't know.
What was the process?
One couple I saw had a collective age of 210.
It's crazy.
So I don't know. I think being married is definitely a key to longevity for men. For women, not always. Depends on if they're happy or not.
Oh man.
So I think having a happy, healthy relationship is such a key part of longevity. And they were very much in the realm of community. And it wasn't just like this isolated relationship. They were embedded in a context of a community that was totally supportive, that celebrated together, that played together, that worked together, that harvested together, that shared sheep together, that made cheese together. They were just doing stuff together as part of the way of life. And they would just stop and talk and hang out and chill. And it was nobody was starting a company or nobody was getting ahead in social media for likes and followers. I mean, they were just living life. They weren't striving or trying to get anywhere. They were just being.
Interesting.
And so their culture was all about the power of these incredible moments where you share with people you love and care about and celebrate life and enjoy life and talk. And we were driving out of this one town in Sardinia because I had these two guides that were really great, and they were local Sardinians. And this car stops in front of us and blocks us. And this old guy gets out and he walks over this stone wall and he waves us to come over. And I'm like, what's going on here? And he just waved us over. He wanted to talk. He saw us in the car behind. He just wanted to talk. So we sat on the stone wall for an hour or so and chit-chatted about life and about his life. And he was Carmen. He was 85 years old and super vibrant, fit guy. And he started telling us about his life and how there was a mudslide that destroyed the village he grew up in, which they moved the town a little bit higher on the mountain. But he still had his farm on that old area, his old family land. So he took us down. He had 6 sheep, and he had a pig, and he had some chickens, and he had orchards, and he had a whole garden where he grew eggplants and peppers and tomatoes and zucchini and herbs and spices. And it was amazing. And he literally took care of his entire property by himself at 85 years old. I mean, I don't think I could do it. Right. And then I'm chasing this guy up this hill after his sheep, and I'm like, wow, I can't keep up with this guy. And he's 85 years old. And so he was super vibrant, mentally sharp. He lived with his family, and they just had this incredibly deep culture. There wasn't nursing homes. I met a woman, Julia, who was 103 months.
Come on.
I say I'm 5 3/4. She's like, I'm 103 months, and she was didn't have kids and lived with her niece and nephew who loved her and took care of her. I mean, she was still working. She was still working, making all this stuff for weddings, all the little tablecloths and doilies and embroidery stuff. I don't know how to do that, but she was making all this stuff, and she was just so bright and still was walking around every day and taking her walks and hanging out with everybody and her friends. And It was really amazing to see this culture where, people were not ostracized or excluded, but, they were included in life.
And it doesn't sound like they're hustling for something. They're working hard to maintain their life, like their home, their farm, their land, whatever they have. Maybe their small business, but they're not hustling for something greater. Is that right?
Yeah, no.
Why can you live long and still
Hustle?
hustle, or just want more, want to build something greater in your
I
life?
think you can. I think it's really about, what happens on the inside, because, one of the biggest things that regulates your epigenome is your mind. So your biggest pharmacy in your body is between your ears. It's the most powerful pharmacy in the world. Wow. And you can activate it for good or bad. So when we are having thoughts that are, stressful thoughts, when we're in toxic relationships, when we're worried or anxious, when we aren't in harmony with ourselves, it activates all these really nasty pathways that drive inflammation and harm your mitochondria. And your microbiome is listening in on your thoughts, is eavesdropping. So those bugs don't like it when you are not happy.
Really?
Yeah.
What is the process of that, from an idea, a thought, into the mitochondria? How does that transfer into a healthy information, into a physical manifestation, versus unhealthy information, data, and a thought into physical unhealthy?
So what's the biochemistry of it? Well, for example, if you're stressed, you're producing cortisol and adrenaline and all these other hormones and proteins that then will trigger a whole cascade of downstream effects that activate transcription factors, that turn on genes that cause inflammation and all these other problems. So you're basically, creating inflammatory thoughts are creating inflammation in your body, literally. And
Isn't that crazy?
And you have receptors on your, like immune cells, for example, for neurotransmitters. So if you're stressed, your immune system is eavesdropping on your thoughts.
Wow.
That's why if you're stressed, you are more likely to have an infection or get sick or have other bad health consequences.
Why do you think it is that our body is built this way, that a thought can either make us feel and physically transform into joy and health, or feel sick and then become sick? Why do you think our body...
Why, from an evolutionary point of view?
Why do you think that is? Isn't that crazy?
It's a crazy
You
thought,
think
right?
something, it's not actually, it's in your mind, right? Where it's like, and then it transfers into your body.
Well, I think I don't know, Lewis, but I think, we have a built-in stress response system, which we needed. Like if we were getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, well, we needed to get on the move.
Right.
And we needed to
run,
jack up our cortisol and pump our blood sugar up and get our blood pressure up and then our heart rate up and flood our body with glucose and, just all this stuff that needs to
survive,
make, it's like, the story, like how someone's, sees their kid under a car and can lift up a car. Like, why can that happen, right? Because we have the system built in to deal with acute stress. And that's a good thing. The problem is we have a society and a life that drives chronic, unmitigated, unrelenting stress. So unless you are very clear about how to discharge that stress, because we can't avoid it, right? But how do you discharge it? How do you not react? And how do you have a different perception of relationship and what's happening to you?
Yeah.
It's all about perception, right? So I always say stress is the perception of a real or imagined threat to your body. So it could be a real threat to your body, like a tiger chasing you, or it could be an imagined threat to your ego, like you think your wife's cheating on you, but she's not. And you get the same physiology. Or you could have the same input. Let's say you're James Bond, and I put a gun to your head versus Woody Allen. It's going to be a very different set of responses, right? Same input, very different response. So that's the beauty of our minds, is we have the power over our thoughts. You remember Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning? He said, between stimulus and response, there's a pause. And in that pause lies a choice. And in that choice lies our freedom. For those of you who don't know about Viktor Frankl, he was in Auschwitz, and he was a psychiatrist in Auschwitz, and he chose not to let even the most horrific thing that's almost ever happened to human beings affect his own well-being and happiness and inner life.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind, right?
It's unbelievable.
So when you think, oh, my life, this and that, we always have a choice, and whether you have stuff or don't have stuff, it's all about our perceptions. So mindset and your thoughts are a key part of longevity and health, and having meaning and purpose. That was the other thing in these cultures. They had so much meaning and purpose. Like Carmine had such purpose. He had to go and take care of his sheep, and he had to feed his family, and he wanted to support the other members of the community by giving them food, and he fed his animals the extra, and so he had a meaningful life, and he also had a very active mind, was reading books and learning all the time. So, that extends your life by up to 7 years.
Wow. Having meaning and purpose. Because you hear the story sometimes of someone in their older years, their husband or their wife dies, and then within 6 months or a year later, they die.
Or a week later, yeah.
Or a week later, right? You hear that story often.
All the time.
And is that because their meaning has lost, or just more they have a broken heart and they don't know how to
both? I mean,
that?
there actually is a phenomena of a broken heart. I had a patient with this once who had this incredible wife. They were deeply in love. They were married for decades and decades. She got breast cancer and died. And he was relatively healthy, and all of a sudden he went into heart failure.
Come on.
Like, boom. And it's in the medical literature. It's literally a broken heart. And it causes actual clinical heart failure, where your heart muscle can't pump the blood around.
Now, that's from, what is that from? Is that from thinking
Yes.
and then feeling the heart, the pain in your heart?
Yeah. It's the physiological phenomena that happen when you have a stress response, the flood of all these stress molecules in your body that damages the heart.
Before the interview continues, if you feel like you're not living your most authentic life, not leaning into your purpose, and not living the life that your future self would be extremely proud of, I've written a new book called The Greatness Mindset, and I think you're gonna love this. Through powerful stories, science-backed strategies, and step-by-step guidance, The Greatness Mindset will help you overcome all the different challenges in your life to design the life of your dreams and then turn it into your reality. Make sure to click the link below in the description to get your copy today. Okay, let's get back to this video.
And we were able to get him better, but it was through energy healing, which sounds kind of wacky and weird, but it was really through his own, getting back in his body, being touched, being held, being energetically reset.
Wow.
He was able to reverse the heart failure. It wasn't by taking some fancy drug or getting a heart transplant.
So he didn't pass away from that, though.
No, he didn't.
But some people do.
We fixed it, yeah. But some people do. Right?
They might isolate themselves even more, and then their body just starts to shut down.
Loneliness is the biggest killer.
Really?
Loneliness seems to be a bigger risk factor than smoking or bad food or almost anything else.
What happens when we're lonely?
Again, it's a stress. Like we're social creatures, Lewis. We all are meant to belong. We have a longing to belong, and if you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, you stick a human out in the desert or a forest by himself,
they're not going to last long.
Forget it. And so this is not true just of humans, but it's all of creation. And E.O. Wilson, who was a Harvard professor, wrote many, many books. He just died, but he was a very, very thoughtful guy. And he wrote a book called The Social Conquest of the Earth, and it's about how from ants to humans, we all work together, like ant colonies, right? They're all working together. And so we have to work together to survive. And that's why altruism is actually a medicine. Altruism and serving and helping others actually activates healing mechanisms in our body.
Isn't that crazy?
It activates dopamine in the same way that cocaine or heroin does.
Altruism and serving, giving.
Yeah.
Why is breathing so important in our, a lot of entrepreneurs here, but in our existence, yes, in our lives?
I mean, and I've been fortunate to be exposed to a couple different forms of breathing. And of course, when you're in the ocean or in the water, breath is an ever important thing because your relationship with drowning. But lately I've been kind of studying under this guy Wim Hof, who does all this breath training. But the thing that you realize is that your spirit or your soul is connected to your breath, and that when you like when a baby takes its first breath is when the spirit comes into the body, just like when the breath stops, so does the spirit leave.
Wow.
So if you really want to get into like a kind of a little bit, deeper conversation, it's a connection to your soul or your spirit. It's you have and then it's obviously mandatory for life. I mean, breath is the way we get oxygen. Oxygen is essential for living. So it's all about breathing at the end, and then we know through cardiovascular activities and any kind of exertion, it's all about breathing. I mean, breathing is your fuel. That's your energy. That's your power. When you're not eating food and digesting, and drinking water, but oxygen is the thing that ultimately fires every cell in your body. So that's your,
So have you been practicing breathing strategies or techniques or working on your breath since you've been surfing and swimming in the ocean for your whole life? Have you been doing that, or is it more in the last year you said you started to dive in and really practice it now?
Well, it's been the last year or so that I've really focused on isolation of the breath. I've been exposed to some yoga breathing and some types of yoga breathing over the years, but I haven't been so disciplined and consistent with it like I have been the last year and a half or two, and so but I indirectly have been doing it anyway.
Sure.
Because first of all, when you swim,
have to when you're swimming.
Swimming's a breathing rhythm.
Yeah.
Being in the water, you always have to hold your breath. So you have a relationship with your breath if you do any kind of diving or free diving. I mean, you already have established a deeper relationship than
the average
normal
person.
people.
Yeah.
Because normally people they don't even think about breathing. They're not even they're not even conscious
and
of
if you
it.
want to become a better swimmer or better in the water, whatever sport you're doing, you have to master your breath at some level.
Absolutely.
So you're getting better just by practicing it.
It's a byproduct of you doing it without even being conscious of it, and then when you do some heavy circuits or other types of intense training, you know what the breath is all about. I mean, usually the breath is what dictates the failure. At a certain point, when you're out of breath and you're behind, you look at any endurance athlete or any fighter. As soon as they start mouth breathing and everybody will say they're finished.
Yeah, their body can't keep up.
Yeah, they're done.
Yeah.
They're going to say they're done.
So what have you learned about yourself in the last 2 years after essentially 40 years of breathing strategies and mastering your breath, now into actually diving into these new strategies? What's opened up for you? What's been available for your body, your mind, your relationships, your health, your businesses when mastering this new way of breathing?
I think it definitely brings a certain amount of control over your system that you didn't have. You have a sensitivity to.
You have more control now in these last 2 years than you did for
sure.
40 prior years studying this?
For sure.
Wow.
For sure. Just because of the sequencing of breathing and the way the body reacts to it, and when you get into, it's like any form of training. You when you put stress on the system, then the system adapts. That's how it works. I mean, evolution is because there's stress on a situation, so there's an adaptation, and then we evolve. But when you start stressing the body through the breathing, then it adapts and becomes more efficient, and you start to get control of it. You find that you can breathe yourself into real calmness.
Yeah.
You can use the energy to bring your energy up and make you more aggressive or more powerful. You can control your lactic acid threshold. I mean, it seems somewhat boundless.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'll just reiterate what happened for those that obviously weren't here. There was probably 10 of us outside. I walked in, you guys were already doing the breathing.
Sure.
And then you took us outside on your pool deck. And we started breathing, and within about 45 seconds, I thought I was gonna pass out. You're like, okay, you're gonna breathe in a certain way, and I'll have you demonstrate this for a second. You're gonna breathe in a certain way, and you don't want to hyperventilate, but close to it.
Yeah.
And I remember my whole body was like tingling. We're laying on our backs, and my whole body was tingling. I was like, I might pass out if I push this.
Yeah.
Because I was dizzy, I was lightheaded. I was like, it's early morning here.
Yeah.
I'm like, where am I? Up in Malibu.
For sure.
And it was intense. And we did it I was like, yeah, okay, maybe this is like a 10, 15 minute thing, warm up for the real workout.
Yeah.
But we did it over an hour, it felt like, of breathing.
For sure.
It was one of the most intense things I've ever done, one of the most intense workouts. And I've played, high level sports in 3 different sports.
Absolutely.
It was insane.
But I guess that's really the point. The point is that you can just be not moving and put the system through an intensity that is more intense than moving all the parts. And I think that's again part of the mastery of it. Like when because we're so trained to believe that working out is something that you bang iron and you run and you bang and it's all this is hammering, and then we have to feel sore. It feel like someone punched you to feel like that was a good workout. Oh yeah, it was a good. Oh yeah, me too. Can you walk? Oh, I can't walk. I can't walk either. Like that, and that was, and we considered that to be good training. When you can go into a situation where you're almost sedentary, you're laying there, and then maybe
pass out.
and then maybe we make you do a couple push-ups, and then you just go to a whole nother place. It kind of shines a light on really what is training, and what is working out, and what is being in shape, and what is all of that we have, we try to box up, we try to package and say, well, this is it, and we have a pretty good mindset about what we think it is, and then all of a sudden something like that comes along, and you're like, well, actually we don't know what it is, but they really feed each other. Those systems are all, they're all feeding each other. Your body doesn't really know the difference. If you can implement strict breathing, it doesn't know the difference between that and you running and forcing your body to breathe hard. At the end, your body's like, okay, well, I need oxygen for whatever reason it is, either because I don't have it or because I'm burning it off. At the end, it needs it. It needs it. Doesn't need to know why. And so then you have to get it. How do I get it? I got to do it through the breathing. And so you can, if you're disciplined. I mean, we learned because we were doing these altitude mask training, so we have these special masks,
training masks,
but they weren't not the restriction mask, but an actual mask that simulates altitude.
Sure.
And you put these resistors on it, and it's a process that they developed for Russian fighter jet pilots. Before they had pressurized cabins, they'd send these guys up, and they'd fly up to 15,000 feet, and all of a sudden they just burrow in, and they're like, well, what's wrong? Well, they're not acclimated to the altitude. So how do we acclimate them? How do we acclimate thousands of them in a short period of time? And so they developed this mask system with these restrictors, and what you do is you wear an oximeter that tells you where your blood levels are. So you can see where the blood level is, and you're supposed to get your blood level down to like 70% oxygen, and you stay there for 3 minutes, and then you come back out. It takes 3 minutes to get there, and you do that 6 times, and then you do that once a day, and then within a couple months
you can build up to it, and
right to 20,000 feet, and you're like, no problem,
you're fine.
But you realize that we can implement that same thing just by controlling your breathing and by restricting it, and you don't even need this thing, but it takes the discipline and it takes the time.
Yeah, it took, we did an hour of it. It was like, the interesting thing was I was doing it and I realized that I wasn't focused on anything else in my life. I wasn't, it came up in a couple moments. I was like, oh, what about that thing that I was stressed about yesterday, and about this relationship issue I have, and about my business? But then it was like, you're going through so much in your body, you have to be in the moment, present to your breath,
in the moment,
that you can't stress about something else, which was so fascinating. I was like, wow, I just did an hour of meditation, essentially.
Meditation. It's actually, and that's the whole thing with, when a lot of Wim's training, the Iceman's training has to do with, and this is, because I've been exposed to different forms of meditation, this is a mechanical meditation system where you can actually implement a process to meditate, not an ethereal process, not something where you have to kind of, where you get to a swami and he tells you to go to this thing, and from my scientific practical mindset where I come from, it doesn't work. I can't get there. It's like, and I transcendental, and I'm all, okay, that's great. But when you tell me breathe this many times, exhale, hold, breathe again, exhale, hold. You're going to see this.
Mentality.
You're going to feel this athlete. I'm coming from math. I'm coming from practical, this does that does this. I need that. It can't be too ethereal for me. Some people actually excel in the ethereal, but I don't. I'm not. That's not the way my mind works.
You need to be in your body more.
That's right.
Yeah.
And this is a way that it's allowed me to do some meditation that, first of all, I didn't know it was possible. And I'm like, wow, that's what they're talking about when the guy, I probably experienced some things that it takes somebody, 10 or 15 years or more to from being taught by a guy in Tibet to even get near.
But you're getting into it in 3 to 6 months by practicing it and being in your body, not just being in your head.
No. And the presence, like you said, all of a sudden you're in a spot where you aren't thinking about anything There's nothing else.
You can't.
You can't.
There's
You
nothing.
can't. It won't allow you.
Like there were a couple moments I
Yeah.
think when we were just
Yeah.
relaxing,
Yeah.
you know, for like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I was like,
You'll drift for a second.
yeah.
But we'll just bring you
and
right
then you're
back.
like, okay, here's the
Yeah.
breathing exercise.
Yeah.
So if you can, let's maybe do like 15 to 20 seconds of what someone could practice at home in a safe environment.
Yeah.
Because you were pushing us pretty hard, and maybe
Yeah.
you weren't, but for me as a
Yeah.
newbie, I was like, oh, this is the real deal.
Yeah, well, you need to go into it slowly. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you can go online and get a course from Wim. Like he has an incredible online program. You know, basically the foundation of it really has to do with and I call it a circle breath. And I don't even, you know, I'm an amateur, but I know that you know, I look at it as a circle breath in the sense of that the in and the out are similar,
Yeah.
and then it's really it's a rhythm. And it's almost like hyperventilation, but not that, because hyperventilation takes a lot of energy and you're short breathing.
So
And
what does
you build up-
hyperventilation look like? If you can
Hyperventilation is more like that, where you start to, where you were not really getting, you can get a CO2 buildup, which
Yeah.
happens, which makes you know, I mean, you can pass out doing any kind of breathing, you know, or lack thereof.
Yeah.
But this breathing is more like, like if you think about pumping something up, like how you pump a raft up, or you
Yeah.
blow a balloon up, you know, you blow a balloon up like,
Right.
so you in that kind of a rhythm, and it really is about oxygenation, right? It's about getting oxygen into the system in a very efficient way, and full saturation, and then from there, and you'll have all these, you know, sensations. Like you said, you feel your body tingle. You'll have weird things on your lips, your ears.
I was getting lightheaded. thought I was gonna pass out.
But those are totally normal things.
So what's the purpose of oxygenating your body? What's that purpose? What's that do for the body once it's complete?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it definitely will allow you to work harder, you know, so that if you implement, like for example, you can do, you know, in Wim's program, you do these push-ups, and you do them just with normal breathing, and then he has you sit there, and then you oxygenate your system, and you exhale and hold your breath and do push-ups, and you do more push-ups on an exhale breath hold than you did while you were breathing.
Wait, so you could do more push-ups, completely letting it go and then holding it, not taking a breath in and pushing. You can do more push-ups than if you were breathing.
Yes.
How is that even possible? Doesn't
Because
your
when
muscles need the oxygen?
They do, but the fact is that you've saturated your system with a volume of oxygen that you normally don't get when you just normal breathe and do an activity. And that's really what it's about, right? It's about you understanding that the oxygen that you store in your system is greater than the one you're getting.
Yeah.
And to get more, because also you have to remember it takes energy to breathe.
Yeah.
So when you add an activity with breathing, then now it takes energy just to do the breathing. And because our breathing isn't very efficient, we're not absorbing enough when you compound that with the amount of energy it takes to do the activity, right? So yeah, the breathing energy, the energy it takes to do the activity, and then you're behind. And that's why ultimately the muscles don't fail because they're failing. They're just not getting the oxygen they need.
I mean, we were like, those of us who had shirts on, you know, we're dripping in sweat.
Absolutely.
Just breathing.
Absolutely.
And it's not even that hot out right now.
I know that. No, I know. It's counterintuitive. You
It's
look at it, you're
crazy.
like, oh yeah, and again, you know, to have the discipline to be able to do it and implement an hour of breathing and realize that you're really getting an incredible workout. You know, that's part of the process. I think that's part of it. It's to teach you that and you know, at a certain point, you know, you either have to be exposed to people that are doing it, or you have to be at a maturity level to handle it. Because you know, in our normal mindset, we just got to grind away at stuff, and it's because that's actually an easier way to approach things.
Yeah,
it's easier just to go, I'm going to get on my bike and I'm going to ride for 2 hours straight, or I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab this weights and I'm just going to bang this weights, or I'm going to sprint back and forth across this field. It's another thing to go, okay, I'm going to go lay down.
It's more discipline to do what we did.
Exactly. Which is the irony of it, right? It almost takes more discipline to do nothing than it does to do something. But that's kind of the irony of the story in a way.
It's interesting because I was so grateful that you were facilitating it for us, because it was my first time. I don't know if there were other guys' first time there.
A couple of boys.
guys.
I think they've done it once or something.
Yeah. And it was interesting because I was just I was like, you know, do we you made it so comfortable for us.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah.
You're like, it's
Yep.
okay. You don't have to do the same pace as everyone else.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
need to breathe,
Yeah.
you can take a break.
For sure.
And I really appreciated how you were facilitating that. You become like a master of teaching it through doing it yourself. It sounds like.
Well, but also that's a approach that I think that I've already always had. I think that's a little bit how I work in my, and it's not something that people perceive of me because of what I do. They think they're going to come and get hammered.
Yeah.
And that's not the way I approach things. Have you read Natural Born Heroes?
Not yet.
So Natural Born Heroes is a phenomenal book, but there's a big, for me it was biblical because it was like of the philosophies of some of the guys in the book. Like the guys that are like fitness natural, that were all about training in nature, but they were also all about no competition. They were against competition because they felt like that it really was a restriction of elevation of everybody's individual thing. And I, because of my kind of lack of, because of my approach to competition, that I always feel like, that a lot of our evolution gets held back because we protect information, because it's really about, I'm going to try to beat you. So if I know something that I think I can beat you with, I won't tell you, because then you'd have it too and I wouldn't be able to beat you. But if my objective is to make you be as good as you can be, and I'm going to try to be as good as I can be, I will be like, you can't believe this, try this. And so that's more how I approach things. And I think because of, especially like in big wave riding, when we've gone out and done the things we've done, that it has to do with the fact that we've done it with camaraderie. We've done it with community. And really the evolution of man, if you looked at why man survived, was because of that was the way we behaved. And it was only when we became so populated and so dense did we create competition, was more out of entertainment, that really competition was designed for entertainment. That's why we have competition. Wow. And at the end, fighting and all these things that we have, they're not real fighting, because real fighting doesn't last very long and it's very brutal. It would never be, you wouldn't watch it on TV, and it wouldn't be something that, and you wouldn't just do it unless you were planning on actually killing a person.
Yeah.
So, and there's also this thing about that everybody being able to do it, like true arts, true fighting, or true activities are meant that a child should be able to do it and an old person should be able to do it, to make it something that really is for the species.
Yeah.
So again, these are all kind of deep ingrained ways of approaching it, but that's how I never approach it like, hey, I'm going to hammer you. Now, if people come with the attitude like, hey, I can do this, then I might subject them to something, but that will be only because that's what they're asking for. If somebody comes to me in confidence, like, hey, I'm going to give myself to you, take care of me. I'm always going to do that, because I think that, it has to do with how I grew up and where we are in dealing with heavy situations.
Yeah.
The situations are heavy enough. We don't need to do anything. I don't need to go and see how long you can hold your breath, because what's that going to do? That doesn't do anything. And the bottom line is that you can destroy anybody. I don't care who you are. I can stack more weights. I can make you hold your breath longer. It's like the stretch is deeper, the breath holding, everything can always be, you can always create something that's undoable.
Yeah.
It's more about creating something that's doable, and how far can we push that? How, and again, individually push your barrier, and it's interesting because that's total Wim Hof philosophy. That's total Natural Born Heroes philosophy. Like, I see it, and you start to see it, and in a way, that's Tough Mudder's philosophy, that's Spartan race philosophy. These are all about getting the collective through, and ultimately that really is the most primal system, because that's how we made it. Because without each other in our evolution, what match are we against all the things in the world? We're no match.
It's kind of like
together.
Yeah, it's kind of like nobody wins unless we all win mentality.
Well, that's right.
Yeah. Nobody
survives unless we all survive.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it doesn't mean I don't like healthy competition and the fun of a little paddleboard race or some bocce ball or something. And my competition concept really used to be more like, or should I say, is more related to like, okay, you want to compete with me and you think you're courageous, well, then we'll go to a big cliff and we'll just keep going up until one of us doesn't jump, and whoever jumps higher is the winner. So I always thought that was a real defined
through courage.
courage.
Yeah, wow.
For me, I go, you want to really talk about, you want true competition. We have competition with courage. And I think that's part of the process that brought me to riding giant waves, that I thought, well, if I ride the biggest waves in the world, and I ride bigger waves than anybody else has ever ridden, and most of the waves I ride, no one wants to ride, that kind of puts me in a unique position.
Yeah, it's your own.
That puts me like, and I mean, I always love the term, the victory through attrition.
Through attrition, what's that? What do you mean by
the last guy standing? That at the end, you don't even need to be any good.
Right.
If you're the last guy and everybody else is laid out,
sure,
in the 300,
yeah.
when there's only one guy standing,
yeah, right.
You're the winner.
It's interesting, and through that approach, you can give all your secrets away. You can give all the information away. It's still who's got the most courage.
That's right.
So you can just be as good as me technically.
That's right.
All the information you need,
That's
but
right.
are you willing to go above and beyond?
That's right.
Me.
That's right.
So what
then it becomes a skill thing.
Yeah.
So then you add skill to that too.
Yes.
So that as an added element of, because you know what, there's always some crazy guy that'll do anything stupid too. So then, will they survive? So then, which again, that's part of the thing. But again, it's part about the survival thing where the guy might be able to go higher, but if you go up to a cliff and then the guy jumps higher than you and he dies,
he doesn't win.
Then you went higher, right?
Yeah,
so again, it has to do with, it has to do with, you can't have the element of who's the craziest because you got
to have skill. Yeah.
You got to have, there has to be, and you also have to have understanding. Mm-hmm. You have to have experience to know where the line is, your line is.
Let's say that you were able to give a 5-step process for someone who's 30 pounds of belly fat or around there, 20 to 30 pounds of belly fat. And they were like, you know what, for once in my life, I want to get like at least a flat stomach.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not going to be super defined and under 8% body fat, but 12% body fat, roughly 10%, and I could get close.
Sure.
But everything we talked about, from sleep to emotional stress to nutrition to, we haven't talked about calories in, calories out, or lifting and things like that yet, but from everything we talked about, if you had to give a 5 bullet point process of like, this would be the foundational steps to get you started on losing that 30 pounds of belly fat, what would you say?
Yeah, I'd say, and I've talked about this before, step 1, very clear and defined breaks between meals, whether you are snacking or not. What I mean by that is, rather than grazing throughout the day and constantly keeping insulin levels high, I find people have much more success by having very clear, defined gaps. So I don't care if you're fasting or not, but eat breakfast and have a very clear and defined break until lunch. Have a very clear and defined break until dinner. Allow yourself the ability for insulin levels to come back down, glucagon levels to come up, so that you're actually getting into a fat burning process between these meals. Every time you're consuming something, you're kind of stopping that process for a little bit.
Interesting.
Right? Even if your calories are, yes, that comes into equation, but you need to have these peaks and valleys a little
Breaks between consumption.
Yes.
Now, can you consume water, teas, coffees, anything
For sure.
else?
Anything 0 calorie. I mean, it's,
0 calorie.
yeah, I think people will naturally eat less doing that too. But I do think that we have to take little bits from the calories equation and little bits from carb insulin model and meld them together instead of having these two camps that are largely opposed. And that's where I say, hey, this seems like an equal, delicate, thoughtful acknowledgement of both sides. You're probably going to eat less by having these clear defined meals, but you're also taking into account letting insulin levels come back down nice and low, and you're not keeping them chronically elevated, which we know is not good either.
Yeah.
So that's usually rule number 1.
Okay, step 1. Yep.
Step number 2 is very similar, but I say have a minimum 12-hour break between your last meal of the day and your first meal of the day.
So 12-hour fasting minimum.
And it's not really a fast, right?
Like sleep and don't eat after 8.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like there's a reason why you get your blood work done after a 12-hour fast, right? Things tend to come back down to homeostasis. Give yourself a chance to get back down to this balance. There's a multitude of different reasons why that's beneficial. Insulin levels getting lower, insulin sensitivity getting much better, so the food that you do eat with breakfast is going to be much more, able to be taken up and utilized, which leads into step 3, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, right? So you're kind of tapering as the day goes on. So larger meals in the morning, if you're not fasting, which we'll talk about here later, if you're not fasting, having a larger meal in the morning
is generally going to be better. And if you look at the research, it's very, very clear that people that have a larger breakfast end up eating smaller lunches and smaller dinners naturally.
Because they feel satiated, right?
And that doesn't mean that you go eat a box of Fruit Loops or Cheerios for breakfast, right? And with that, I'll kind of dovetail into a slightly different piece that kind of coincides with that. Okay, there was a BMC medical genomics study that's probably one of my favorite studies that demonstrated that you can have higher fat content in the morning because you end up starting the day with more insulin-sensitive muscles and less insulin-sensitive fat cells. What that means is you have less likelihood of storing fat as fat in the morning. And that way you start your day with higher fat, higher calorically dense meals. So maybe steak and eggs, something like that, without a bunch of hyperpalatable carbs, right?
Yes.
Something that's calorically dense. And then as the day goes on, taper calories. Carbohydrates are lower calorie than fats, even though they do spike your glucose and spike your insulin. It's okay to have those at night if you're not overdoing it. So a lot of times what I will do is I will have a higher fat breakfast. I will have something like steak and eggs for breakfast, or usually like steak and like ground beef. I'm a big fan of like that Joe's scramble kind of thing that you
so
do,
good,
right?
man.
With like a little bit of goat cheese, a little bit of feta, you know, maybe some like lox, make it very Mediterranean. And that's pretty high fat, so it's calorically dense, right? It ends up being like 800 calories, right? Then as the day goes on, like a slightly smaller lunch, and if I am having carbohydrates, they're usually allocated to the evening time. That doesn't mean I'm having cakes and pies. It means maybe I'll have some lentils. Maybe I'll have some, you know, something Mediterranean, right? Then, you know, that's going to naturally be lower calorie because there's not as many fats in it.
Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner
Like a popper.
like a popper. Gotcha.
Yep. So you just, and that's you know, just age-old wisdom, right? It's
There you
like
go.
that's like
Small dinner,
I remember
yeah.
my, you know, I'm largely like Mediterranean. I'm mostly Italian, so it's like I look back at that, and like my grandmother was always kind of saying like she always had these light dinners, these little teeny dinners, right? It was just like, and you look at a lot of the Mediterranean cultures, and with the exception of when they're having big feasts and stuff for special events, like a lot of times they are having really small dinners, right? And they're like shutting it down right after dinner. It's like maybe they'll have a little bit of coffee or whatever it is they're having, and then, you know, go right to sleep.
Yeah.
And then when you go into step 4 is, you know, your diet should optimize your sleep, right? That's something that we kind of talked about in the beginning, but the best way that you can optimize your sleep without really digging super deep into what is stressing you out and causing this sort of internal battles that might be keeping you up, you know, cutting your food out a few hours before bed is usually very, very powerful for people. And that, again, it nicely coincides with everything I'm talking about. Again, if you're having those 12-hour breaks between dinner and breakfast, well, then the earlier you eat your dinner and shut it down, the earlier you can eat breakfast the next day, right? If you stop eating dinner at 6 p.m., you're done eating, then by 6 a.m., you're good to eat again. And chances are you're not going to roll out of bed at 5:59 and immediately go eat at 6.
No.
You're probably going to naturally end up fasting longer.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a quote-unquote intermittent faster. You're naturally kind of, you know, getting into that category, right?
Okay. And number 5?
And number 5, and this is something that you pull the throttle on or hit the throttle on occasionally, right? You want to temporarily, like when it's time to really pull that lever, temporarily reduce fats and then bring them back up, right? So that's sort of my lever, right? If I'm following all 4 of these lifestyle principles and things are working but not working as fast as I want, what I will temporarily do is reduce fats out of the diet, even if I'm low carb. Okay, this sounds crazy, right? But then bring them back in once weight has started to come off. People forget that even if you're doing, and I'm largely a low carb guy, so I catch heat for saying this sometimes, but fats are still calorically dense. So it's the easiest lever to pull from a food volume standpoint to dramatically reduce calories really quick and then be able to bring them back. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have just this point where you're chronically restricting calories forever and ever and ever. And then the moment that you do come back up, your body's like, oh, shoot, put the weight back on.
Yeah, it's not fun.
I actually think, and there's recent research to back this up, that keeping calories moderately high and then having aggressive short-term drops, like reducing fats and bringing calories low for a couple of days and then back up, can actually be very, very effective, which is probably why fasting works so well for a lot of people that just do it at random.
Yeah.
Like they'll just be like, I'm eating 6 days per week normal, and then I do a 24-hour fast once per week. It's great because you're never letting your body get accustomed to this decline in calories. You're just like status quo, whoa, what's going on? And then back up to normal.
Who do you recommend fasting for and who do you not recommend it for?
I don't think there's many people that shouldn't do fasting to a certain degree, right? But there's a large degree of different kinds of fasting.
There's 24-hour fasting, there's 16.
Exactly. And like a 16-hour fast, if you want to put the label on it, you can call yourself intermittent fasting, but there's a lot of people out there that are probably intermittent fasting that don't know they're intermittent fasting, right? So 16 hours is I think the benefits start at 16 hours. So someone doing a 16-8 fasting, that usually works, but the reason that that's working is for two simple reasons: caloric restriction and insulin being lower. Nothing magical is happening with a 16-hour fast, but when you start creeping over that 16-hour mark is when the benefits start to kick in. So like I personally, I fast usually 3 days per week with like a 20 or 21 hour fast. So I'm still eating like 2 meals and I just do it 3 days per week. So it's kind of intermittent. I can't think of a lot of people that wouldn't have success doing that. Because almost everyone that even thinks they wouldn't be able to do it, they might get hungry the first couple of times, and then after that, it's a cakewalk. It's not. Now, people that have serious hypoglycemia issues, they should probably be conscious of it. Mm-hmm. That being said, and full disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a dietitian, but even people that are dealing with hypoglycemia, a lot of times getting their bodies adjusted to periods of time without food is actually a good thing, because it teaches their body to be able to utilize alternative fuel sources, so they're not reliant on this undulation in glucose.
Right.
There's certain people that, if you're very, 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 very active, then yeah, it might not work for you. Like someone that's working crazy manual labor construction. I'm sure there's different situations, clinical conditions that people shouldn't fast. And those, defer to your doctor. But as far as general people, I can't really think of anyone that wouldn't get some benefit out of it.
How did that feel, going from number one in the world 7 years in a row to number 2? Did you think you should have won?
Of course. I still do, but
how did that make you feel though? Did you lose the confidence? Did you still feel like you gave it your best, or did you feel like, oh, now I'm not as good as I once was?
I was hurt.
Really?
I was very hurt emotionally, because after I won number 7, I had a emergency hernia surgery, and in the world of bodybuilding, that's almost like a death sentence, because long recovery, but also it's an aesthetic issue, because you can have a scar or something like that. So, where the different sport, just patch you up and go back in.
Yeah, you play
bodybuilding. So
it's all aesthetic.
Mm-hmm. So I retore that incision, getting ready for 2018, 3 weeks out.
Oh.
So to have to deal with that emotionally, the physical part, I was able to deal with the pain, like the pain tolerance that I have.
Right, you're a machine.
Yeah,
you can push through any pain.
Exactly. I'm in my subconscious mind. I'm just like,
you're not feeling it.
No,
yeah. You just push through.
Just push through. But when I realized that when I realized that I more likely was not going to win, as I was getting on that stage that night for the evening, for the second day, because there's 2 days, I said to myself, I'm not going down without a fight. And you can't fight. Right. So what can I control? Well, during the pose down, you're going to be as aggressive as possible. You're just going to hit shot for shot with this guy. You're going to call him out. I grabbed his damn wrist and I walked him over and I said, no, you hitting this shot right now. Because right now I'm still your senior times 7. If you want this, and you're going to probably win, but you're going to know this is for me too. Because I need to see these photos later on.
Wow.
And I need to prove it to myself that I didn't just let you have this. Even though I was told little birds here and there from judges telling my trainer that, like, yeah, it's probably not going to happen for Phil. I still, for my pride, man, I was like, oh no. You could tell me that I'm going to lose, and I'm like, oh, I don't give a damn. Like, I'm going to fight. And I'm glad I did do that. He probably already knew he was going to win, so he was like, I don't care.
Well,
I'll get these shots, whatever. But the feeling I felt, oh man, you're just standing there. The next name I read is going to be your 2018 Mr. Olympia. And when they said Sean Roden, not Phil Heath, I've been used to hearing Phil Heath. It hurt so bad. You talk about knives. It was more like someone took the sawed-off shotgun and just blew me away.
Oh, man.
But yet I was still alive, and I could still see the hole. And I'm just like, did this just happen? And now the roar from the crowd
I was trying to digest that part.
Cheering him, not you.
I was trying to digest that. Was that more like, what does that mean? At the time, I don't know what that means. Is it just for him, or is it the fact that they just hated me? Because I definitely developed the Tom Brady effect in my industry for sure. Like, they just want to see me lose.
Of course.
So you got people that just want to see you lose. They don't care who it is that wins. So I knew there was a combination of all that. But then I'm like, but you have to, you got to acknowledge the guy. So I hugged him and told him, congratulations, you look great.
Ooh.
Which he did. And I told him, thank God that we can make money for our families doing this. How cool is that?
Wow.
How cool is it? I said, congratulations, man. And I don't remember what he said back. But I do remember now I'm having to deal with more roars. It's just ear piercing. And you're trying not to look in the crowd because I don't know if they're laughing at me. I'm thinking like all of the negative.
You're embarrassed.
crap.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm embarrassed. I'm the second in the world at something, and I'm feeling embarrassed. But yeah, that's what you do when you're a winner. You do feel embarrassed. You do feel like they're laughing at you. You do feel like you didn't complete the mission. This isn't completing the mission. The mission is to win, to be the greatest of all time. This was taken from me. These judges, like they ruined this for me. It wasn't because of my own lack of diet and training and this, but my incisions toward like, what the hell? Why? Now, why? That's starting to play. But as you can see, like all milliseconds, trying to digest. They put the second place around my neck. To be honest, Louis, I don't even know where that is. So I get the handshake from our league president.
Try to smile.
Try to be cool, but it's like, what's he supposed to do, man?
Yeah.
Like, you know, he can't show like favoritism as far as like me as a human being. Did it probably maybe hurt him too? I'm sure it did. Because he knew I love that. Because I went from basketball not having it to bodybuilding and struggling and not having money to finally earning and traveling around the world and wanting to be Mr. Olympia, going through all this crap, and now you win it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again to not having that feeling. I got on one knee and I prayed.
On the stage.
On stage. While they're awarding, I don't know what they're doing with him. I said, Phil, before you walk off, you're going to give credit to your creator because you know what? This is the defining moment of you as a human being, not as you being a champion anymore. This is about you. You can't be a hypocrite. You got on your knee and you pointed up in that sky, you prayed, you thanked God and all this other stuff. But this is where it matters the most. This is such a character building moment for yourself. This is not for show. This is not for everybody else. But you made winning habitual. Well, you're going to make these are habitual things too. This can't just matter when you win. And I thought about my future self, what that would look like. So as I walked off, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I remember having that check. I was like, this is BS. I took all the medals off. I remember one of the expeditors, like stuff like guy, I was like, I quit. I was like, F this. He was like, it's just so bad for me bad sportsmanship, but I was just pissed. I'm like, F this, I'm done, like, because now I got to go get surgery again. I'm just like, man. I don't know if I can go through that. Like, this is just too much. The internet was getting to me, like, it was just a lot, man, because I was knocking on the door of Lee Haney and Ronnie Coleman, and that got taken from me. So I don't know, like, if I could, and if it was really worth it. So I go backstage, and I'm friends with Tim Grover. You know Tim. And he talks about that book, Winning.
Yeah.
Talk about winning. Phil, you're a winner, but not tonight. It's sleeping with him. And all that applause, all those people that were cheering you on, or even booing, you didn't care. You loved it. There was someone else right now. You're walking off stage into something unknown. You've been second at the Olympia before. But it was different because you now lost the title. Before you got second, the year before you won. It's different. How do you process this? So I'm like scatterbrained, and I'm dieted. I'm depleted. I'm trying to figure this stuff out.
You got no sugar either.
Yeah. So I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, okay, subconscious mind, where's my bag? Drink some fluids.
Yes.
Put your clothes on and get the hell out of here. You know, it's interesting with winning. It's like when you're winning, all the pats on the back, even the people that hate you kiss your ass. They do.
Yeah.
They do. When you lose, you get to see some reality. They're with him now.
Right.
There was no one backstage. There was no interview. There was no one there. They claimed that they were. But I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to sit here and wait while you guys, and that's part of winning. Yeah, you're supposed to wait until he's done
we're done with
celebrating.
him, and then we'll
and
talk
then
to you.
yeah, I was like, no, I'm out of here. So going to that hotel room, long walk, man. I wanted to walk home. Get to the hotel room. You know, you have bottles of champagne. You know, you got a big old sheet cake. Do I eat this? No. Oh, Instagram.
This was what,
2018?
18.
Give credit where credit is due. Go on Instagram and congratulate them. Now I got to deal with that. And do I punk out and leave the comments off? Because there's going to be some people that are going to let you, they're going to clap back at you. Oh yeah, you deserve to lose, F you, this and that. I was getting all that. You know, even before, when I was winning, you're going to get that times 10 now. Because you literally said that you were going to win. And, they're going to like, oh, he's arrogant, he's this, he's that. Let me, those devils come out, man.
Wow.
Because they saw vulnerability. So I realized I was so emotionally raw that I had to trick myself into just staying in gratitude.
So hard sometimes.
Imagine all those years you're being invited to the best nightclubs. I would party at XS and Encore Hotel. They'd shut down the lights when I walk in and play The Champ is here.
All right.
Oh, they do all that cool stuff. I didn't have no after party that year.
Ooh.
I didn't want it though.
Right.
Because I was at the point in time in my career where I wanted more intimate moments with people who really mattered.
Right.
And I knew that a lot of my even close friends and relatives were taking advantage of that hospitality.
Sure.
So I just wanted it's funny though, because when you're winning, you have all the entourage and stuff. I literally had 90 people on a guest list going to that nightclub and stuff. You know how much that costs?
So much.
So much. Imagine how many people poured me a cocktail, pat me on the back. That's how it works though. That's the other side of winning though.
Yeah.
You deal with those hanger-ons and stuff like that, but when you're losing, I didn't have any text messages.
My entire growing up, I talk about my parents. I talk about the hard work and the leading by example, and they were always, there was always something to do. There was that. There was me being one of 32 first cousins. Always, everything was competitive. Everything was a competition. We would, now I realize it was my parents trying to tire us out and, hey, run around the pond. Let's see who can run around the pond the fastest as kids. We're like, yeah, let's do it. And so that type of stuff. And so there was that. And then, high school baseball, I had an incredible high school baseball coach that would push us. And we would always joke that we ran more than the track and cross country team. And, he was huge into mental toughness. And, he said he did CrossFit before CrossFit was a thing. That's his joke now. And, we would do these workouts. And now I look back having an exercise science degree and I was like, what the heck were we doing? It was stupid. But it was hard and it was mentally tough, and that was his deal, and mental toughness, and there was that. And then I had being in the fire department and those lessons that I learned from that. I think it's just a mix of all of it. I don't think there was one thing that I can pinpoint down or think about the mentality of what one thing it was. I think it was just a mix of all of it, and like wanting to win the games, having the the atmosphere where I could do that, and like having those guys that would train with me in the mornings, in the midday, in the afternoon. Those to push me, and my cousin the same way, and just all of that into one perfect storm. I guess there's not one thing that I can be like, oh yeah, that was it.
How did you feel like you handled the pressure though? Because during those first few years where it seemed like a lot of pressure,
right?
And, so many people there, it's on the line. Each event matters, or you lose. What did you think about before every event would start, or in the middle when you're like, gosh, I'm exhausted?
Yeah.
Like, this person's crushing me right now. How did you stay focused?
Yeah, I think a huge part of that, like I said, was my faith and not having such a, not having that pressure on. There was still pressure. Like, I'm not going to say that, I didn't have pressure on me, but it took some of that pressure off. And
what would you think about in that moment when you felt like, oh, this pressure is on me? What would you say to yourself or internal conversation?
The good thing is like I'd had that rope fall and I'd embarrassed myself greatly, or way more than I was going to embarrass myself again. So it was kind of like I've already done
the worst.
The worst that it could happen in my mind was the worst thing that could happen. So it was like, it's going to be all right, And then the more and more I competed, and the more the years went on, I noticed that hey, it's not about one event. Like as long as there's damage control, like there's certain events you're not going to do great at if you can damage control in those events. And I think that was one thing that I kind of figured out a lot earlier than people was, everybody was like, well, when I go out there, I compete against myself and I just do the best that I can and blah, 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 and all this, the stuff that people want to tell themselves when they don't want to push hard or don't want to take credit for their, something happening. So what I learned was you can watch people and watch, hey, I need to stay ahead of so-and-so. There's times where it bit me in the ass, but it was like, luckily for us, you kind of knew what lane you were in, what place you were in. And so you could figure out, all right, so-and-so is maybe better at this, but if I'm, within either a rep or two or a person or two of them, I can make up points or not lose too many points, and then I can get ahead of them in another event. And so I kind of learned that, you would kind of call audibles in the middle of it. You're like, oh, I got to push here. I need to do whatever. And so I think that was something that one of the things that I figured out a lot earlier than people was it is a sport. Like as much as, it's just working out, there is some strategy to it. You're trying to game things and you're trying to all right, I know this movement is kind of a rest for me so I can kind of push here, or, this movement's going to be a little bit harder so I need to slow down and gaming workouts. And that was something I think, training so much and doing so many different things that I did and the volume that I did, that I learned, I'd done certain combinations of movements. They may not have done the exact workout, but I knew how they kind of played off of each other. And so that was something that I'd learned pretty early on and helped a ton.
That's great. How did you handle fear throughout the career?
Yeah, there were times where, especially I remember specifically one time in 2013. So I'd gotten 27th on a pool event. I got second on a rowing event. It was the half marathon, but you started out with a 2K sprint, which was the worst thing ever. So I went 27th, second, 7th, I think, on the marathon, and then I went 7th, I think, on the burden run. Well, Kalipa had went first. So he had a huge lead, and I'm just pissed off, and I'm in a horrible mood. And my wife comes up, and we're kind of sitting in the athlete area between events, and she's like, "You don't look like you're having fun." I was like, "I'm not having fun. I'm in I was probably in third or fourth at the time. This is awful, whatever." And she's like, "Go get your stuff." I'm like, "What do you mean get my stuff?" She's like, "Well, if you're not having fun, we need to go home." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm gonna go get my stuff, leave this, I trained all year for this." She's like, "You do the best when you have fun." And I'm like, she's never played any type of sports, anything like that. She did when she was really young, she played basketball and stuff like that, but she never in high school. She's the least competitive, could care less about anything CrossFit related. But she was like, "Go get your stuff, we're leaving. Go tell Dave we're leaving." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then she's like, "Well, then start having fun." And I was like, "All right, well then," I didn't start having fun immediately, but it turned around. So she always takes credit for, that year that she was.
Wow.
But yeah, it's you try to have as much fun as you can, and over the years you learned that, when I first started competing, a month out, my nerves would start getting me, and you're like, man, butterflies and all that. Well then, after a year or two, it was 2 weeks out, then it would start, and then it was a week out. Now it's
2 days before,
Now it's the event of, then I start getting a little nervous still. Everybody's like, "You still get nervous?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, I still get nervous." I think when you stop getting nervous, it's not fun anymore.
That's true.
But yeah, I think it's just the nerves and being a competitor, and you have that before it. You have all this build up, but then literally as soon as 3, 2, 1 go happens, it's just
you gotta go.
It's just everything goes away. You talk about flow or whatever it is, but it literally, I can't tell you any music that's played during events. You can't hear any of the cheers. You can't hear any of that stuff. You're just kind of in it, and you just kind of go through it. And it's hard to explain. It's just a competitive nature. It's just, it's hard to people are like, what makes you so competitive? I'm like, I don't know. It's just something that you just get into, and you don't really think about those things. Yeah, the workout sucks and it's going to hurt. And, for a long time, like I said, I have those certain things that go through my head, I'd write Bible verses on my shoes and think about, like the crucifixion of Christ. And those were the things early that really got me. But then it's just like, after you've done it for so long, it's what you do.
Yeah.
It's like, you just get into that space and you get in that zone, and it's go.
Well, you've already experienced the pain so much. You're like, I know it's going to suck.
Yeah, it's going to hurt. It's just
Everyone's
like, when is
hurting.
it going to hurt? Like most of the time you're like, all right, this workout's going to take 10, 15 minutes, but the pain's really going to set in about minute 9 minutes, depending on whatever the workout is. But yeah, it's like you've almost become not numb to the pain, because it still hurts, but you've almost like embraced that pain, and you just know. It's almost like a sick, twisted thing where you're just like, this is what it is, and it's, I was talking, I've got kind of an addictive personality, and there's, some substance abuse in my family history, but I've never had any substance abuse. But I think working out is probably my substance abuse. Yeah, really it is.
How important is pain for everyone in the world to experience on a daily or weekly basis?
It's when you grow, man. It's you never grow and you never move forward when you're comfortable. Like you've got to, as bad as it sounds, you got to go out and you got to seek that stuff. You have to. That's when you get better, and that's when you grow, I think. It's the same as physically, like when it hurts, that's when something good is happening. So you almost embrace that, where it's like, this is going to hurt, but I know on the other side I'm going to come out better. And it's the same way mentally. It's like, if you're not pushing, you're not growing.
Why do so many people resist pain when they know?
I think people just, it's either their upbringing, or it's they've never had that, or they just don't enjoy it. You're not going to enjoy pain. Like, let's be honest. We talk about like some of the most miserable experiences. When you're done with it, you're like, that was awesome. Like you go out and seek these like
I
challenges.
never want to do
You're
this
like,
again. But
this
then
in
you're
the middle of it, you're like, I went on this elk hunting trip for 6 days, and for the first 3 days it was awesome. The 4th day, downhill. We didn't see any elk. I hiked 60 miles in 6 days, like sun up to sundown, going through the woods, and I'm like, this is miserable.
Yeah.
Like, I hate this. And then I got done. I'm like, I can't wait to do that again. Like you're just like, it's sick and it's twisted, but like you're growing in that, as long as it's productive pain. Like there's certain things that aren't productive, but as long as it's something good, you're on the other side, you're going to come out better. And I don't know if it's hard for me sometimes to relate to other people that are like, how do you get there, that you want to, you want to compete, or you want to go to that pain? I'm like, how do you not want to? How do you not see the benefit of it? It's hard sometimes for me to like talk to people that don't get that, like you get it, we're just talking about it, but it's hard for me, like it's just hard to like relate to that, because I don't know what makes me want to do that. But my wife, she's similar. She's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do anything that's painful. Like for me, it's just how I do it.
Why do you think you're wired that way to want it?
I don't know. I think it's that perfect mix of everything that we talked earlier. It's just
because you want to win that bad.
I want to win that bad. It's not even I want to win that bad. I don't want to lose. I don't want to make an idiot of myself. Like I said, it could be just us two and nobody else could be watching, but it still just drives me crazy, and it's ridiculous. Like if you really look back and like, yes, like we're saying, you want to grow through pain, but like some of the stuff, it's like, why does that cause? Like, why am I so caught up in that? Sure. But it's just the way I am. It's just the way I'm wired. It's the way I've always been wired.
How did you meet your wife?
Met my wife getting my hair cut. I was a firefighter getting off shift, and we had a mutual friend that she cut my hair and she colored Hillary's hair. And so while Hillary was getting her hair colored, I was getting mine cut, and we'd actually both gotten out of like 4 or 5 year long relationships. We were both miserable in those relationships and finally got out of them. And I was a perfect gentleman to every woman that I ever dated. My mom was always like, open every door, do whatever. And I was a jerk to Hillary. And she kept coming. I was like, I'm not ready to get in a relationship, like,
have some fun. I gotta go on that spring break trip.
Exactly. And so I'm like, was a complete just jerk to her.
Really?
And she just kept coming and was like, I don't know. She gives it like doesn't take any crap either, and would just like, there was one time, this is awful, and I'm such a jerk for doing it, but she came to visit me at the fire station, kind of met her, introduced. This was like a little bit later on when we were like, we'd kind of hung out and talked and texted and all that stuff for probably 3 or 4 months. And I was just like, I'm not ready, and all this stuff. So she comes to the fire station. I introduced her all to the guys, and she's going to leave. And, I take her out to her car, open the door, let her in. And she's like, so what are we? Are we talking? Are we texting? What's
Are we
our
together? Are we,
And I'm like, I don't like titles. The stupidest thing I could have ever said, ever. And she goes, don't ever talk to me again.
wow.
I was like, okay, that's not good. So the next day.
So you text her the next day?
I didn't text her the next day because I was like, all right, I'm going to see what happens. The next night she goes, why the hell have you text me all day? I was like, you told me not to. And so I was like, all right, this girl, so she, she can dish it out and she's perfect. Like she's completely, the statement opposites attract are literally me and my wife.
Really?
But we work really well together, and she supports me in everything, and I support her in her things. And she could care less about anything CrossFit related. She
Really? Even this is your whole life?
whole life, man. This is
She
my
doesn't
life.
care about it.
Listen to this. So she
supports you and shows
she
up?
supports. Yeah, heck yeah.
She goes to
She's
the
there.
game,
She's my biggest fan, but she could care less. Like as long as whatever. And so we have 3 kids. Our oldest, Lakeland. She bought all the most expensive, like, dolly clothes for her, and Lakeland hates them now. But at the time, Lakeland maybe wore this stuff once, twice, whatever. So I'm doing some laundry one night with her. And so fold laundry, I take it up to Lakeland's room. I open this closet, and it's just like the amount of money hits me that we spent on these clothes. And it's just
That have
like
been used
the light.
once.
And I'm like, ah. And so I'm like, whatever. So, and we had some infertility issues and all that stuff, and Lakeland's adopted, and all 3 of our kids are adopted. But so I, didn't really, like, I would give her crap about spending the money, but I'm like, hey, we've waited long enough for this kid. Like,
Yeah.
I want her to, and so this is years later. And so I walk back downstairs and I'm like, not to be a dick. Like, I just want to know, how much money do you think is in that closet up there? And she's like, it's a hobby. And I was like, it's an expensive hobby. And she goes, well, if you weren't so good at CrossFit, that would be an expensive hobby. And I was like, that doesn't make sense at all. Like, that just pays for this stuff.
business.
Like, this
Yeah.
is what I do. And she's like, well, you know what I mean. And I'm like, no, actually, I don't know what you mean. So that's in a nutshell, that's our relationship.
And you start upgrading yourself internally, because the stuff that would have gone into digesting the food you eat every 2 hours because that's what someone told you to do in the 70s, instead of doing that, you're eating the stuff in your body that makes you old. And when you control insulin and you control autophagy,